Welcome to the Diane McClay Show, empowering life through choice. Get ready to discover new perspectives, motivation, and balance through Diane's compassionate storytelling and insightful discussions. Whether you're feeling stuck and discouraged or curious and looking for more possibilities, Diane has your back, and she's ready to take you on a journey of self-discovery and expansion. Choice is powerful, and so are you. The Diane McClay Show starts now.
Welcome in, everybody. Happy Friday. Happy Earth Day 2022. Can you believe it's been 52 years since 3 individuals actually had the wherewithal to have forward thinking and start thinking about protection for the earth and eliminating air pollution? Quick shout out to the junior senator from Wisconsin, Gaylord Nelson, in 1970, an organizer and activist, Dennis Hayes, and the Republican Congressman Pete McCloskey, who actually brought the Earth Day movement to life 52 years ago. Welcome in. Thank you for being with us. You're on the Transformation Talk Radio Network and the Cornelius Stephanie Media Group. We're so happy that you made the choice to be with us today. I'm your host, Diane McClay, and my guest is my new friend and energy partner, Dr. Sobel Bunis. She's a doctor of chiropractic medicine. She's had a 35-year journey of practicing emotional healing, and she has done, her history brings her to the perfect intersection of being able to share how emotional healing impacts the body, impacts the mind, and how choice allows us to move forward with positivity. Sobel, welcome in. Thank you for being with us today.
I'm so glad to be here. You and I have been looking forward to this conversation for a while, so I'm really, really happy to be here, and happy Earth Day.
Right. And we never really seem to run out of things to talk about. Right. So I know you just got back from a beautiful retreat in Mexico. I said we'd bring a little bit of that energy into the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then tell us a little bit about maybe something you learned at the retreat that our listeners would benefit from today, especially on Earth Day and grounding and connecting to ourselves.
Right. I'm happy to. Well, I am Dr. Sobel Bunis. I've been in a holistic chiropractic family practice for 36, 37 years, who's counting? And it's been fabulous. I mean, I always say holistic chiropractic because people don't understand that chiropractors have always, always, always been the mind, body, spirit doctors from 110 years ago. That's how we began. Now, some chiropractors just do chiropractic medicine, but those of us who decided to be holistic, we added in nutritional work and some kind of emotional work. And I was very fortunate that right after I graduated from school, there was this fabulous chiropractor in San Diego, and he'd already been in practice 25 years. And he, like I, was taught in school, people are designed, the body's designed for healing. People should be able to get well. We expect people to get better. We want them to walk out of the door feeling better. And he was frustrated because he was doing great adjustments, great nutrition, and there were still certain people that just weren't getting well. And he said, it's got to be on the emotional level. And that led him, because he was a genius and he wasn't going to give up, that led him to discover and to develop a technique for how you find and you release stored emotional trauma from the body. And fortunately, one of my partners took the first seminar, came back to Santa Barbara, grabbed me, and the other partner said, pack your bags, we're going to San Diego. And that's what we did. And we learned how to do emotional clearing work. And I've been doing it ever since. Now, speaking of San Diego, where this doctor lives, right across the border in Mexico is this amazing spa. It's called Rancho La Puerta, and it's 4,000 acres. It's in this gorgeous valley coming up against this beautiful sacred mountain. It's been there since 1940, and they have been totally dedicated to health and well-being. They have total respect for the land. They have this gorgeous organic biodynamic farm there. And so the food you're eating is literally from the farm. It's just a beautiful place. And I was fortunate enough to be invited there as a guest by my girlfriend who was teaching a seminar there, and they get to bring a +1. So I got to spend an entire week there. And now I'm applying to teach there myself. So it's just a glorious, glorious place.
That's amazing. Congratulations on that. And I mean, what a beautiful way to really describe the concept of holistic living, not just holistic healing, but being able to connect to the land, connect to food that is grown right nearby you, remove the pesticides. I mean, the whole Earth Day movement started 52 years ago when we had this realization that we had pollution in the air from lead-based gasolines, and we had oil spills, and we still have pollution and we still have those things today, but awareness, which is one of the things that I teach too, you can't change anything until you have awareness. It's the first step in any level of transformation. Wouldn't you agree?
I absolutely agree. I think, people, and that's why I emphasize in all of my programs, I emphasize the more aware and the more conscious you are, the healthier you're going to be. So even if you're choosing to do a behavior that isn't in your best interest, there's a total difference between doing it unconsciously, where you kind of come to afterwards and go, oh, what did I just do? Which happens a lot for people, as opposed to, for example, I'm feeling really frustrated and unhappy right now, and I'm going to eat something emotionally. But you do it consciously. You go to the refrigerator, you get that thing, whatever it is, and you eat it. But because you did it with awareness, I absolutely believe that's a step in the path towards healing, because you are absolutely tuned into what's really going on with you, and you make a choice from that place. Whether you choose to walk away from the refrigerator or go towards it, it doesn't matter. What matters is that level of awareness. It's a big, huge step towards healing.
Yeah, and it's something that you and I, we started having a lot of great conversations off camera about awareness. And once you have awareness, you can create options. I mean, we use different terms in the different businesses, that from the chiropractic side to the coaching side, but the end result is the same. Is the goal is that we want all of our clients to be able to use all of the information that's available to them. And one of the beautiful things that you do is you help people tap into that information that's stored in our bodies, stored in the subconscious or perhaps unconscious part of the mind. So let's dive into that a little bit, because I think before we can tap into that, we have to know, how do we even know it's there? And for me, I kind of equate it to like emotional pain, or you use the word trauma, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but emotional pain or things that have caused us to experience something and then relate to it and create a memory out of it. It's like your computer operating system, right? We have a lot of software in the background that makes all of our programs work until they don't. And then sometimes we can get malware or spyware or a virus in our computer system. Or maybe you just notice that things are slowing down. Maybe you notice something doesn't open right. Maybe on your computer, files get moved, or maybe on your computer, stuff just doesn't work. That's when we notice that the obvious things aren't functioning the right way. That's a little clue that our computer might have a virus. To me, I would imagine that the emotional pains are very similar to that.
Yeah, so I think let's give everybody a really basic understanding of, number one, the fact that our bodies will hold on to and store the memory of anything, I'm going to use the word traumatic, anything that you perceive as traumatic. So if you're 3 years old and your parents are screaming at each other, you're not old enough to understand what that means. You just know that the people that you depend on are in some kind of a fight. And so the screaming and the yelling and that sound of those raised voices to a 3-year-old could feel like life and death. And so their little body will hold on to the memory of those raised voices in that very threatening situation, because to a 3-year-old who doesn't have the ability to look into the future, like a 10-year-old can say, mom and dad are fighting again, big deal, I think I'll retreat to my room. Or they might think something even more sophisticated, like, ooh, mom and dad are fighting, did I do something to cause it? Like a 10-year-old can be more sophisticated, but a 3-year-old, it's just a pure primitive terror. So now if you fast forward into the future, that 3-year-old may become the kind of adult who, and we all know someone like this, an adult who every time they're in a situation where voices start to raise and they sense trouble, they jump in and they rescue. They say, don't get upset, let me take care of that for you, I'll take care of that for you, let me fix that. And what's actually happening is their body has stored the feeling of trauma, terror, dread, feeling vulnerable, whatever the emotion was. It's connected to the sound of yelling. And so now as an adult, the sound of yelling is actually triggering that stored memory. So think of that stored memory as a stuck file that you no longer need in your computer. You wish you could delete it because it's taking up space. The computer keeps referring back to it in some negative way, but it's not helpful anymore. And so these emotional clearing techniques have been designed to find out, where is that file that says fear and dread from age 3, and let's delete it from the system. And in a way, that's what this technique does. It deletes the stored emotional trauma. So that's the
Yeah.
beginning of
And anything can be stored, right? I mean, I read, and I don't even think these numbers are accurate. The article I read was probably from 8 years ago, where it said that something like 11 million bits of data come into our brain. And I'm sure with electronics now, it's actually in the terabytes, right? It's in the gigabytes. But that our conscious mind actually only retains about a third of that. So that 2/3 of data that we've been exposed to, the environment, the noises, the lessons, the story, the judging that comes up from our own self, that is, you're basically saying that all that stuff gets stored in the background and it gets stored in the body. So my first question is, where? How do we know where it gets stored in the body?
Okay, so when we're talking, okay, you're talking about information being stored that's not threatening information.
Or we don't know that it's threatening.
Right.
So one, we can get overwhelmed by a lot of information coming at us and the brain has to put it somewhere.
Right.
But while the brain puts it somewhere, there's still a story being attached to it. Is that information helpful or hurtful to me? Is that right?
That part I'm not as familiar with, like the general sense of information that's sort of an overwhelming amount of information that the body isn't necessarily paying attention to. My understanding is that the brain can only pay attention to so much. And so it's only paying attention to what's essential for survival in the moment. But what I'm specifically referring to in terms of stored trauma is these moments that felt threatening on some level to you as an individual. Those particular stored traumas, they get stored in the nervous system. They literally get stored in the nervous system. And if you know Chinese medicine, they have what they call the meridian system. There's a beautiful crossover between the nervous system and the meridian system. And that's how my great teacher figured out how to access emotions, because he looked at ancient Chinese medicine and modern understanding of the nervous system, and he put 2 and 2 together, and that's what guided him to find out, oh, you're holding a feeling of anger and frustration from age 6, let's say, and oh, look where it is. It's stored in the liver gallbladder meridian, right? That part of the nervous system, and he knew how that connected to the spine. So he was able to come up with a technique that could connect the meridian, the nervous system, and the emotion and the age all together, and that's how the technique was figured out. That's like really tracing a specific file back to its origin and helping it release from the body. My sense of, I wanted to also answer your original question about how do we know when we have something stored and where we have stored trauma. I think probably one of the biggest ways that we know is that something in our life isn't going the way we want to, right? Like you're all about making conscious choice. So let's say you're making a conscious choice about, and you're coaching someone to making conscious choice about relationships. So there's, let's say, been a recognition, oh, I keep choosing people who turn out to be bad for me, let's say in romance, for example. And so you make a conscious choice and a decision, next time I'm going to choose someone different. And so a choice gets made, you meet someone, you go, oh, this person's different, and you step into the relationship only to discover 6 months down the road, what? That
the same old pain shows up.
Right, it's the same issue. That is a dead giveaway that you are storing something in your nervous system, either in the form of stored trauma or mistaken, limiting, negative beliefs. Now, I can give you a really strong example because this just happened the other day with a current patient. And she was talking about, oh, I keep picking people who are, how did she describe it? If I'm a little held back, a little aloof, they come after me more. But as soon as I step forward and make myself more available, they run. So it turned out that this woman was carrying a deep, painful feeling of yearning from her past. Now, you know what yearning is. It's painful. Yearning is not just, oh, I want this or I desire that. Yearning is that excruciating longing for something that you believe you can't have. So this woman is carrying almost like a belief that she can't have what she wants. So she goes into relationship and her whole energy field is beaming out, I've got to have it, but I know I can't have it, I've got to have it, but I can't have it. And who will she attract? That unavailable person. And it plays out over and over and over until out of that conscious choice combined with emotional clearing, where we find and we get that yearning out of the nervous system, then everything can change. Does that
There's really something to be said? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
Did that answer that question?
Yeah, it does. And there's actually a kind of a lesson that's sort of coming into my head, but real quick, it goes to the point of what you and your fellow doctors do is that you treat the source of the problem, not just the symptomatic symptoms of the pain, right? It's easy to say my back hurts. You go in for an adjustment. Of course, when everything becomes back in alignment, it's going to feel better. But what causes it to keep going out, or what causes chronic pain? It sounds like you're saying is that if you don't get into the root emotional pain that's been stored perhaps since childbirth, for me, I don't relate to the word trauma. I had awesome parents, I had awesome upbringing, and I'm feeling very fortunate and lucky that I didn't have to experience a lot of typical trauma like a lot of other people do. But the story that's coming to my mind for me is, it's taken me a really long time to get to the point where I ask people around me for help. And I realized that I had this belief system about doing it myself. And when I was working with a coach, I realized that there was this moment where I was doing story math problems, probably in 8th grade, 9th grade, right when you start discerning algebra. And my dad is very, very linear. He can see all the story. He can see all the facts. His brain looks at the paragraph. He knows exactly where to start. He knows the order in which to start deciphering the clues in the story problem. And I couldn't see it. And I remember really, really distinctly, he wasn't mad, but he kept poking at the book and saying, all the answers are there. You should be able to figure it out. Why can't you figure it out? You don't need to get help from your sister. You don't need to look in the back of the book for a clue. You should be able to figure it out. And I was like, man, that's pretty innocuous, right? It's just a dad helping a kid try to do homework. He sees something completely different than I do, and I couldn't see it. What I realized over time, developed as a part of my story, is the lesson I learned was I have to figure it out myself.
Right.
I have to do it myself.
Right.
And depending on other people to help me get it done isn't the way I should live in the world.
Exactly.
Right. I let go of that. But every now and then it still comes up and I'm like, oh, that's really interesting that a memory got triggered because I felt inferior or not smart enough or not good enough, essentially because of the way my dad was articulating how I should figure out the math problem. And he wasn't being mean about it, right? He could see it and I couldn't.
Right. So you took on what we call a mistaken or limiting belief, because it's not true that you should be able to figure everything out on your own. It just isn't true. But you took it on because he was a very important, influential person in your life. That's one of the ways that limiting beliefs take on. Now, we're not going to call it traumatic, but we will say that when somebody has something traumatic happen to them that's truly traumatic, they might come to the same conclusion that it's not okay for me to ask for help. And it may have come from a truly traumatic situation. So now you and this other person come forward into the world. You get into this conscious choice and decision-making process with a life coach, and you're able to recognize the belief and choose to let go of the belief. And now when it comes up, you recognize it and you let it go. But the person who had a real honest to God trauma and came to that same conclusion, they won't be able to let it go. And that's where emotional clearing comes in. For people who maybe they can get close to it, but they, no matter how aware they are, they just can't let it go because there's a true survival threatening experience that happened for them and it locked in, and the body's saying, we're not letting that go because we need to protect you in the future in case something similar happens. So I'm always amazed in all my years of practice that people who had great childhoods like you had, as compared to people who had truly abusive childhoods, a lot of those people have the same issues as adults. The difference is that the ones who have the really rough abusive situation, their stuff might be stored in a deeper, more survival-based way, and they're not going to be able to just go, oh, I'm aware of it, I've had my therapy or my coaching, and now I can just let go of it. You can let go of something that isn't locked in survival, and for you, that wasn't survival. It was just, oh, here's my dad, he's telling me something that I'm going to take as true. So you both might have a mistaken belief, but yours is much easier to let go of. And I have a similar, really powerful, wonderful upbringing too. I was very fortunate that way. And but that's how beliefs work. It's pretty interesting.
So I realize that, in a 1 hour show, we don't have time to really give all the specifics on how everybody can start recognizing these mistaken beliefs or start working with them. But 2 or 3 bullet points off the top of your head. What are some common things that our listeners could start paying attention to or start getting awareness about? Obviously, being able to connect with a professional like yourself to get in and get the deeper work and make sure that the results are long lasting is always recommended. But a couple things off the top of your head that our listeners might be able to start doing for themselves to start engaging this emotional clearing that you're talking about.
Right, right. Well, one is I think it's really important to recognize when you get triggered and when you're what we call reactive. So let's say, let's talk about that 3-year-old whose parents were screaming at each other. They're carrying this deep feeling of dread and fear from age 3, and it's playing out in this behavior pattern, right? As an adult, they're always jumping in to rescue every time they hear voices yelling, right? So one thing is to recognize that you have an issue. You recognize it. Let's say that person goes to therapy and the therapist helps them remember some things from childhood, and they go, oh yeah, I grew up with a family that was yelling and screaming all the time, and that's why I jump in and have my rescuing behavior. But if you then walk out the door and it doesn't change the pattern, that's a big clue. You're aware of it and it doesn't change, then something is being held in your nervous system that's anchored there as a stored memory of trauma, and your body will not let go of it unless something very specific happens to release it. And that's how your body in a way will protect you. So that's one way to know. Another really important one is if something happens in front of you in your present life, and it's what we would call a relatively small thing or a relatively benign thing, but you have a massive emotional reaction to it, like huge reaction to where you might even say to yourself, oh my God, what am I so upset about? Or someone you're with might say, what's going on here? That is the clue that something really small actually reminded your nervous system of something that happened that truly was traumatic from the past, and all those stored emotions came screaming into the present, and you have a huge emotional reaction, and it completely doesn't fit with what just happened. That's another big clue.
I want to reframe that real quick because I like bookend type things. So when something really small creates a really, really big reaction, you should probably tune in and listen. You know, the example I use is when I'm intrigued when I drive with other people and someone cuts them off. I'm like, okay, first of all, the chances of that happening they're pretty high, especially in a big city.
Right.
But it's really interesting to see on a scale of 1 to 10 how violently somebody else reacts. Now, obviously, in the news we've seen it can go to, you know, guns getting pulled out and somebody getting killed, and God forbid that happens. But it's like when my dad will just instantly start calling people names, and I'm like, Dad, you have no idea if that's like an emergency responder trying to get to his job. Like, there may be a legitimate reason why that person felt like they could cut you off, but in the grand scheme of life, right? You didn't get into an accident. You didn't get injured. It has no bearing on what you're doing. It has no bearing on your decision making. Let it go.
Right.
Right. But now I'm going to look at that and go, I wonder if maybe my dad was in an accident and I don't know it. Right. And so when someone cuts him off, it triggers that chain reaction of what his mind and body went through. I don't know that, but I find it fascinating that when something really, really small gets blown out of proportion, yes, and the reaction is really, really big, you're basically saying that's a pretty big clue that there might be something that needs to be cleared.
That's a clue. And for your dad, sometimes, and I would say most often, it's not that the thing that happened to him in the past was directly related to being cut off in a car, let's say, but something happened, let's say he does have some stored trauma that gets triggered every time someone cuts him off. It could be something that happened to him that endangered him. It could be something that happened to him that made him feel out of control. It could be something I could almost bet has nothing to do with cars or driving, but it's something that carries a similar energy. And if we had time to get your dad here and muscle test him and check out and go, hey, Dad, we're going to check out this angry driving thing, right? We would find out what it's connected to if, in fact, it was a trigger. Now, another way that I think people will really recognize is when people are in relationship, whether it's, you know, your partner, your spouse, your son or daughter, a friend. This is what happens when two people trigger each other, and it's classic. And it's another big hint because you asked for these bullet points. So let's say we've got a husband and wife. The wife opens her mouth and says, blah, blah, blah. The words travel over to her husband. He hears the words. Something about the tone of her voice or the actual content triggers an old memory from the past for the husband. Let's say something from age 7 that brings up a feeling of anger and frustration that's been stored for 30 years. So now he's a grown up. So he reacts by speaking words like an adult, but the emotional tone of an angry 7-year-old is now present. So he now communicates back to his wife with the angry tone of a 7-year-old, and the wife hears the tone or the words, and now she gets triggered down to, let's say, age 6 from something that happened to her, and now she's reactive. And this is what most arguments look like when two people are triggered. And there's no getting out of it. In other words, there's no reasoning in those moments. Because over here, we've got a 7-year-old that's angry, and over here, we've got, let's say, a 6-year-old who's afraid, and they are at it with each other, and they know, you know what, we get into this exact fight all the time. So the best thing that you can do, talk about awareness, the first thing to do is recognize, oh, we're in this again. We are here. Or the individual to say, I know I'm triggered right now. I know that my emotional response right now is way over the top. And if you are capable of saying to the other person, hey, with love and respect, I would just want to say to you, I can feel that I'm really upset right now, and I need to step away and calm down a little bit, and then I will be happy to come back to this conversation. Is that okay with you? It won't always work, but sometimes it does. And that will settle things down, and it will make you guys aware that you have this pattern, and you can plan for it. You can say, look, we keep getting into this. Let's set up a deal that we recognize this sooner, and we go to our corner sooner, and we don't keep at this because it doesn't get anywhere.
And I would imagine that as you work with your clients, each of your clients probably could articulate that a different part of their body gets tense during that type of reaction or overreaction. For me, I feel a tenseness in my diaphragm, and then my shoulders get tight. So what I like to coach people on is, okay, just stop for a minute and tune inwards and just say, what do I feel in my body? Am I feeling like I want to punch somebody? Am I feeling sweaty? Am I feeling nervous? Am I feeling afraid? I think sometimes that's one of the pauses when we can't clear something again until we have awareness about it, but we may not even know what it is. But if we start to have awareness about awareness, like, hey, how is my body feeling? Oh, it feels tight. Where does it feel tight? Shoulders, diaphragm, chest, biceps. Okay. Is there a pattern to that? When was the last time I felt this feeling in my body? And that would be a place that I think would be really helpful for our listeners, is just even notice what's going on, right?
Exactly. And to take that's a beautiful point, and to take it even a step further in terms of what I've noticed over the past 36 years of doing this work. What I've noticed, and I don't know that anyone's put this into a scientific test yet, but someday I'm sure it will. I have noticed that clearing a lot of women in my practice, so many women have been taught it's not okay to be angry. It's not okay to express anger. So a lot of women store their anger, they keep it inside, and it ends up, the pattern of it is in the liver gallbladder meridian. And I started to notice that a lot of my female patients were having real, honest to God, physiological problems with their liver and gallbladder. And they also had this emotional pattern of having a lot of stored anger and frustration that never got expressed. And same thing with the gut. A lot of people with all sorts of gut issues are carrying the gut emotions, feeling vulnerable, feeling lost, feeling abandoned, unrequited love, insecurity. Those are all gut emotions. And as you say, you said, oh, I can feel it here and it radiates here. You know, that level of awareness is a great first step for recognizing that your body is carrying stored emotional pain, right?
And that's a great segue to bring us into our break. We're going to take a quick break and come back. We're talking with Dr. Sobel Bunis about emotional clearing, and we will get into what's stored in the body, and we'll get in specifically more to what women can do to help raise their consciousness about emotional clearing. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back in. Thanks for sticking with us. I'm Diane McClay, your host on The Diane McClay Show, where every day we are trying to empower your life by engaging your choice. My guest today is Dr. Sobel Bunis. She's a chiropractic doctor and a specialist in emotional clearing. And before the break, we were just starting to hit on the topic of how emotional pain is stored in the body and some clues that you can take every day to start generating awareness and choice for yourself. If you missed the first half of the show, go to my YouTube channel and you'll be able to catch the replay as well as the replay on Transformation Talk Radio. Sobel, Dr. Bunis, we were just starting to tap into things that women specifically can do. You've treated a lot of women. You've made a connection between gallbladder issues and some of the emotional pain that's being stored. So let's dive right back into that. Women specifically, cultural, ancestral, emotional beliefs. Maybe it's not always ours, right?
Exactly. And that's such a wonder. First of all, I have absolute belief in the possibility for healing. I always have. And I think it's what led me to chiropractic, because I was always seeking, what is that place where we can get to the root problem rather than just deal with symptoms? That's what led me to chiropractic in the first place. And so I have absolute optimism about healing. And I believe people are capable of having so much in their lives, and that they should be able to have what they want in their lives. And that if they aren't, something's got to be in the way, and let's find it and let's deal with it. And we want to get to the deepest root of it so that people are really, really clear. So when I started doing emotional clearing over the years, we discovered that some things, even if we had cleared out all the traumas from a person's life, there were still some issues that were showing up. And my friends and I started to recognize that some of what people are carrying, especially women, are some of these what we'd call transgenerational or cultural issues that have affected us over time and that are affecting us today. So it used to be, people didn't understand that we can actually be affected by things that have happened to our ancestors in the past and that we carry through our cultural experience. So there are many cultures that we come from a culture, depending on what the ethnic background is of your parents and your ancestors. So you might have Northern European or South American, or you could be from all over the place culturally, and you might have those cultural influences in your life. Like over the years, I worked with a lot of people from England, and they carry a lot of issues around trying to be successful because they grew up in a very class-based society that said, who do you think you are for trying to step out of the world of being a steel worker or a coal miner and go be a doctor in London? So I've worked with a lot of people over the years who had to release those cultural traumas, those cultural patterns that have held them back. But with women, what's so fascinating is, think about women who have come to me over the years who say, Sobel, I want you to work with me on decision making. I just have the hardest time making decisions. Now, from their own life experience, they might have been taught, kind of like your dad taught you, about you don't need to ask for help. A lot of people were taught growing up, there's a right answer, there's a wrong answer. And so a lot of people get very paralyzed by that. So they won't make a decision because they're afraid of making a wrong decision, right? So that's one way that what you've learned, or maybe how a teacher scared you in school and you got too nervous to raise your hand again, right? You might be carrying that. But think about women over the course of centuries. Women were told who to marry. They were told what their whole life would be like. You will be married to this person that we've chosen for you. You will go move in with their family, and you will devote yourself to raising children and taking care of your in-laws, right? Or women not having the choice to be educated. So over the centuries, we can look at all the different ways that women have had no choice in their lives. And now, I think it was the 1960s when women could finally get a loan at the bank or a credit card. It's not that we haven't been free to choose for a very long time. And a lot of women are still carrying the residue of those cultural influences. And once we recognize those and start to clear them from the nervous system and let them go, then we talk about a whole new kind of freedom.
And my brain's going in three different directions, so let me tame it down a little bit. In addition to the inability or lack of support to make our own choices, women's value has also been determined by other people, especially if they're arranged marriages. Your value is worth X number of animals and farmland and grain. but your value is worth Y number of acres. Like our value has often been, we historically, in a lot of different cultures, the value of a woman has already been predetermined.
Right.
Right. And in cultures, and China has changed its culture, but there was a time period where if you had a male child, you were prestigious, and you were shamed if you had a female child.
Right.
Right. And so in addition to not having that choice over generations, our value and our self-worth was often combined in that same space. I can only imagine kind of the trauma or the emotional pain that would get stored from one generation to the next.
Exactly. So I love that example about your values. So your self-worth, your self-esteem. How many people are working on basic self-esteem issues? And if I'm working with them and I'm clearing out things from their past, we have to look at those deeper issues, the ancestral and the cultural issues, because of course, as you say, women have not been valued, but other than, the children they can produce and how they can care for a family. But, men have been also imprisoned in a similar way. Now, they look like they've had more power, and in some ways they have had more power, but they've also been told, you will do this, you will marry, you will have children, you will take over the family business. So you might have a guy who's naturally, intuitively artistic, who might want to pursue something on that level, who's been shuffled off into a family business that for that person's way of thinking and being and creating is completely numbing and deadening. So
Right.
Men have been in prison too, I think. And I think if we look at male-female relationships, in order to really create healthy relationships in the present world, which it certainly needs to be worked on in a more deep way, we have to look at these cultural issues, recognize them, and clear ourselves of those influences in order to come together in a healthier way. So.
Yeah, and I want to go back to, anytime I get a chance to say this into the world, I'll take it. So when you mentioned the concept of being paralyzed by trying to make the right choice or being fearful of making the wrong choice, and at the Choice and Courage Company, what I do is I would love, love, love to get everybody's help in changing the binary concept of the right choice and the wrong choice, the right decision and the wrong decision. Because if we just gave ourselves permission, if we let go, if we created some resiliency around choice, the beautiful thing about being a stand-up biped, where we're on 2 feet, literally as soon as you pick up 1 foot and walk towards something, we are literally simultaneously walking away from something else, right? Think about that. Like you literally have 1 foot anchored in what you don't like and 1 foot headed towards what you do like. So if we could all just agree that there is no right choice or wrong choice. If we just step into the power of making a choice and then using our observation skills and saying, how does it feel? What are the results? Does it make me feel good? Does it move me towards my goal? The binary part comes in the yes and no when we can say, is this in alignment with my values? Yes or no. Does this make me feel better? Yes or no. Are there consequences to my decision? Yes or no. That's fine, but if we can make one choice and relieve the pressure and the paralysis of trying to make it perfect and make it the right one in the moment, the beauty is, unless you're like a brain surgeon or sending somebody to Mars, right? You have the opportunity to go, oh, maybe that wasn't the outcome that I intended. How do I redo that? We need to give ourselves permission to get a do-over and just make a choice and then use awareness and options to move forward from that.
Okay, I love that, and I agree 100%. And because the reason you and I are together is that I'm here to show where people are prevented from making the choice that their conscious mind would want to make. What comes up for me on that is so many children, when they are raised, are invalidated for what they feel and what they know. And these are the kind of things that I find and clear for people. I have so many, and male and female, they were told when they were really young, when they said to mommy and daddy, oh, this is what I like and this is what I feel. No, you don't. You don't really feel that way. You don't really think that. You didn't mean to say that. So people have that experience of continually being invalidated in childhood. By who? By the adults who are the authority. Now, in your case, you took on that way of thinking about, I don't need to ask for help, from your dad, who you loved and respected. So you made a choice, right? But we're talking about even more deeply than that, people being able to trust what they feel and trust what they know. And if they're continually told, no, you don't, that's not true, you don't feel that way, you don't think that, then people to come into adulthood and be able to say, oh, I'm okay making a choice, when they don't even trust their basic instincts.
Trusting sounds like you're also talking about the story of vulnerability. And in off camera, you had shared a quote with me where you said vulnerability does not have to be connected to fear and pain. Do you want to dive into that a little bit, since we're talking about how do we reconcile this thing that is so big inside us?
Okay. So I know that we talked about it. I'm not remembering the exact conversation, but what's coming up right now that I think hopefully will be helpful, and if not, you keep asking me until I give you what you want. You can be vulnerable, meaning open to experiencing things that might be difficult or painful. But if you have a healthy boundary around yourself, you can manage that. So vulnerability doesn't necessarily mean, it means a level of openness, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be hurt by what you're open to. So let's go to this idea of being sympathetic or oversympathetic, or empathetic and over-empathetic. Like if you are my patient and you come to me and you tell me this really powerful story, I can be moved to tears. And it happens to me a lot with patients where I'm moved to tears, but I'm not being negatively affected by what they told me. I'm being moved. So I'm being vulnerable in the moment, meaning I'm allowing myself to take in something, especially from someone else, that might be painful. And I'm allowing myself to be empathetic with them, but I'm not being hurt by it. So that all has to do with having really healthy boundaries. And so I think being vulnerable means that you're willing to put yourself out into a certain position, but you don't necessarily have to be afraid if you can trust that you have good boundaries. And good boundaries it means, in a basic way, this is me, I know who I am, I know what feels okay for me, and I know what doesn't feel okay for me. And if it doesn't feel okay, I can open my mouth and say no. Now, for a lot of people, it takes years to get to that point because they've been invalidated in childhood, or they've had their boundaries crossed so early in childhood before the age of self-awareness that they never had a chance to develop healthy boundaries. Does that answer the question?
It totally answers my question. And I have not personally worked with you, but what I'm getting is that if someone chooses to call you and walk into your office and say, I'm curious about this emotional clearing, I heard it on the Transformation Talk radio. What I'm hearing is that 1, you set the container. 2, you create a safe space. 3, you encourage people to explore potential stories that create this emotional pain or this hidden trauma. 4, you ask people to start questioning, or maybe not questioning, but looking at the belief system that they have and see where it may have taken a right turn instead of a left.
Right.
And then really when you spend quality time with one of your clients, what's intuitively coming through to me right now is that you help them step into that vulnerability of the trauma or the emotional pain, but do so in a way that it doesn't control them, and they can start to expand their boundaries and work from within that emotional pain rather than looking at it from the outside and being harmed by it. That's what I'm intuitively getting is how your process would work. Am I close?
You are. It's wonderful. And what you're describing is what happens in a private session, and which is part of what I do. So in that, once you discover in that session, let's say you're carrying an experience of pain from age 7 when your mother remarried, and then the guy she remarried was this really controlling, kind of mean stepdad, and then your life changed in this really dramatic way, and you carry these particular patterns, and this is how it's played out in your life. Once we find the issue, we actually go through a clearing process where I'm having them hold different points and go through a breathing process to really connect with and to release it from the energy field. And once you get it, you really will release it. It moves out of the nervous system. So
and is it true that simultaneously, while you're identifying and releasing the thing that has been limiting, you are also anchoring into safety and strength and something that can continue to support somebody after the clearing?
Exactly. And sometimes what happens is once that emotion starts leaving the nervous system, it's like it's been sitting there like a button. And now that emotional button is no longer there. So when they leave the session and they go out into the world, they're going out into the world minus something. They no longer have that trigger stored, that button stored in their nervous system. And the thing that would have triggered them before no longer does. So they no longer get into this fight with the spouse. Or what a lot of times people call me a week later and they'll say, oh, I just came back from a meeting at the Chamber of Commerce where I stood up and spoke in front of 200 people, and it hit me on the way home that that was the first time in my life I ever spoke without being afraid. And we may not have even been working on fear of public speaking. We were working on something else altogether, but that's how it manifested. So you never know how it's going to manifest. It isn't always direct because emotions are not logical. But yes, you walk away, something has shifted, and now you're interacting with the world in a different way. And yeah, I do encourage people to find those ways to anchor a more positive, like sometimes we'll take the negative belief, and once we've cleared it, we let a little time go by, and then we come back and say, okay, now what would be a powerful reframing of that for you to use as a, I'm not crazy about the term affirmation, but to try to anchor it, as you say, in a positive way. Right. The reason I'm not fond of affirmations because when affirmations started happening, people were walking around saying, oh, I'm this, I'm that, this is happening, that's happening, and none of it was true. And it never rang true for me because their body was holding on to all this trauma and all these negative beliefs that were in direct opposition. And I saw people saying all this stuff but not getting anywhere. And I thought, what's going on here? Why are affirmations not working? And this is why. And in cases where those affirmations do work, they weren't being held, coming up against those negative patterns that were stuck in the nervous system.
And it sounds to me like one of the places that you lead people to is that they actually get to stand up and say, this is what's okay for me and this is what's not okay for me.
Exactly.
Right? Like
yes.
They actually get to say, it's my right. It's my God-given right to say what's okay for me and what's not. I had a situation where there was somebody who wasn't returning my calls and I was getting frustrated and irritated. And then I was kind of getting snarky, like, I wonder how long it's going to be before they return my text.
Right.
And I realized that's not who I want to be. Mm. And so when I was telling the story to somebody, I said, I choose to spend my time with people who value me. I choose to spend time with people who return my calls and respect my time.
Right.
And that is an affirmation at some point, but rather than falling into the defensive, reactionary, the other person isn't showing up the way I want them to.
Right.
Then there was kind of this, hey, what's my responsibility here? My responsibility is to choose what's right for me. And when the moment is right, to articulate that. Whether I articulate it to this particular person or whether I articulate it to my tribe, one way or the other, it's one thing to have it in my head. It's another to say it. And then it's another to embody the action that goes along with it.
Right. And the beauty of the example you're giving is that we all know, if we don't know, we should know by now, right? That we can only work on ourselves, right? We can only change this one. So you took responsibility for the reaction you were having and you came to, your own conclusion about it, but you have no idea what was going on the other side because that person might have been caught in who knows what, and it was manifesting as not answering your calls. But the beauty is you disconnected from that because that has nothing to do with you.
And it circles back to the response versus reaction.
Right.
The response is with deliberate intention, and the reaction is I have no control over it whatsoever.
Right. And since you said that, I want to say that probably one of the most beautiful ways to summarize emotional clearing work is we want to clear what's stuck in your nervous system, whether it's traumatic or painful, however you want to look at it, because if it's triggered and you're in a reaction, you really aren't making choice. You're reacting rather than choosing. And once you clear out all this reactive stuff, then you're really making a choice. So are you reacting or are you choosing? And that's a great tip for people: ask yourself the question, am I reacting right now, or am I really making a choice? And depending on where you are in your own development, you're either able to ask that question and be aware of the answer or not. But it's a great step along the path of healing, is to ask yourself that question.
And asking yourself, am I reacting or responding? I know that you're really excited. You've just put together this beautiful program series, like a membership series. Do you want to talk a little bit about kind of this concept of people choosing to delve into some of the work you're doing and do it in a group environment? Do you want to talk about that a little bit, and why people should really look you up on your website?
You mean now that I'm well rested from Mexico, I can... And by the way, I'm going to the background that you've got behind you. I'm going to a wedding in Yosemite this weekend. So
nice.
I'm already getting ready for that. So here's the thing. I figured out a couple of years ago that I wanted to make emotional clearing more available and more affordable and more accessible for people around the world. My name is Sobel. I started calling myself Global Sobel, and that's everybody laughs at that, but it's kind of happening. I was just in Mexico, so there you go. So I figured, I've done this work in groups before, where I've actually had groups of people in front of me, and we did emotional clearing as a group, and it was very powerful. So I thought, this is before the pandemic, I thought, I could travel around the country, pick my favorite cities, and meet up with the local people there and say, hey, don't worry about doing emotional work with your patients. I'll do it for you. I'll come here twice a year. We'll do groups. We'll pick whatever topics you want to work on. I'll get to travel. I'll get to do my work around the globe. It'll be wonderful. And then the pandemic hit. And my friends all said, well, put it on Zoom. I thought, okay. So I called some of my favorite friends and patients, and I said, help me test this out. So I created emotional clearing programs based on a topic, rather than you've come to me as an individual and you're going to tell me what your issues are and we're going to design it specifically for you. It's good. I do that. I'm doing less and less of that because I'm wanting to be more available for this, to make it more available for more people. But let's figure out a way to make it available and accessible. So I picked topics, and then I brought people into a group on Zoom, made them all private so that nobody could see anybody, because I felt it's nobody's business. You get to be private. And then I said, okay, this one's on relationships. This one's on fear and anxiety. This one's on body image and weight. And this one's on money and wealth. Those are the 4 programs. And each one, instead of you saying to me, oh, this is my issue with money, let's work on it, I said, hey, I've been working for almost 40 years with people on money issues. I know what their issues are, and I know how to guide people to get there. So instead of having a one-on-one session, I let people sit at home on their own, and I guide them to find from the past what are the places where they are holding painful emotions that are connected to their money and wealth issues, their body image and weight issues, their fear and anxiety issues, and their healthy relationship issues. And so I put together these programs. I ran it through really trusted patients and some of their friends and some friends who had never had emotional clearing before. And I was absolutely blown away by how well it worked, because I thought this is going to work, but I had no idea how well. And I think you've probably discovered too that the pandemic has really created a place where people are spending more time on their own. They're going a little more inward, and there's something about being home on your own, doing emotional clearing where there's nothing to distract you. People started saying to me, Sobel, I love you, and I know we've done great work together in the room with each other, but there's something about being home, alone in my room, and following your instruction. I got into a very deep meditative state, and I cleared things at a deeper level than I've ever done before. So that was a great thing to discover. And
let's tell people how they can get into that. How can they find information about you?
Absolutely. It's emotionalclearinghouse.com. All one word, emotionalclearinghouse.com. There are 4 programs that are available. Each program is 3 one-hour sessions that I recommend you do over the course of the week. So there's that. 4 programs, and I'm developing more material all the time. The second thing we came up with is, some people are really busy. They don't want to do 3 one-hour sessions in the course of a week. So we created a membership. And for $47 a month, you can join the Emotional Clearinghouse. And every month, we just launched it last month, there will be a new half-hour emotional clearing. The first one is on grief and loss as it relates to all of the loss that people have gone through in the last 2 years. The next one coming out in May is on fear and anxiety. And every month there'll be a new one. It's only $47 a month. And when you join, you get to pick one of those complete 3-part programs as a gift.
And if people have questions about it after they go to your website, do you encourage them to call you or email you?
They can email me, they can call me, either way. Email is probably easier. And then I do have a YouTube channel also called Emotional Clearinghouse. And very shortly, I'm going to be announcing a podcast where I interview people. I'm going to get you on there for sure.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, that podcast will get announced soon. But in the meantime, the few interviews that I have done are on the Emotional Clearinghouse YouTube channel. So all of that.
Okay, well, not to confuse it with Publishers Clearinghouse, who actually promises you, they give the illusion of getting a lot of money. Emotionalclearinghouse.com actually will help you get to some of those hidden pains, those hidden emotions that may be holding you back. And I would imagine that anybody who goes through any of these programs or works with you, there's already a level of freedom. So if you feel like you're not living to your potential, if you feel like something's holding you back, or you've tried everything else and nothing else is working and you're just not where you want to be, I highly recommend that you go to www.emotionalclearinghouse.com or send Sobel an email, SOBYL, at emotionalclearinghouse.com. Get in touch with her and you can get some more information about what's going on. Last parting words before we have to say goodbye on this beautiful Earth Day Friday.
Oh, honey, thank you so much for having me. We could go on all day talking about this because you're all about choice and I'm all about people having a choice come from the right place for them, where they have full freedom to choose what's best for them. Absolutely.
Well, thank you for taking the time to be here with me and to blend these two terms. You're doing great work in the world. I highly recommend people check Dr. Sobel Bunis out. And as always, today I'm going to end the show with take care of each other, take care of the earth, be kind. Be kinder than you need to be. And as always, engage your life by empowering your choice. Dr. Sobel, thank you for being with us today. Hopefully we'll see you again.
Thank you so much, Diane.
All right, take care.
Thank you for listening to the Diane McClay Show, where you are empowered to enact change in your life through choice. You know that little voice in your head that's been telling you to pursue that passion project? Or maybe it's been screaming for you to go outside and explore the great outdoors. That voice is you, and you deserve to be heard. Listen, make a choice, make a change, and watch yourself grow. For more information about Diane or to work with her personally, visit DianeMcClay.com.